Hands up. Who here has read a comic book in the last month? Great. Good. Solid lineup. Who here has watched a pro wrestling match in the last month? Okay. All right. We can talk about both topics.
Okay,
That's all I wanted to know.
Well, because you wrote a book about Vince McMahon.
I did. Oh, yes. Oh God. I'm still kind of getting the feedback on this thing, and I don't want to make people even more pained to listen to the sound of my voice than usual. Well, let me just hold it very far. No, that doesn't help. Okay, let's try this. So yes, I wrote a biography of Vince McMahon, the entrepreneur best known for being the long-running CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment, formerly the World Wrestling Federation. And you were kind enough to work with me on the spin-off zine, Greater Power, which I made with a bunch of artists, writers, cartoonists, to make sort of Vince McMahon and wrestling themed stuff. And you expanded upon, to my great honor, the work that you did in your graphic biography of Andre the Giant by depicting something kind of amazing, folks, which was...
This was incredible. So I wrote a book about Andre the Giant years ago before I started making weed comics. And we got to learn a little bit about his death and how when he was cremated, they couldn't cremate him in France because he was so huge that no crematoriums could handle his massive girth.
He was huge, and I managed to, very long story short, during the research, although the book was not about Andre the Giant, I managed to find the guy who cremated Andre the Giant. The person who was the last person to see the body that countless millions had worshipped before it became ash. And it was one of the most astounding interview moments of my entire life, was being on the phone with this guy. And afterward, once the book was ready to sort of show to some exclusive people, I showed it to you and was like, do you want to do something? And I was so happy that you were able to honor Andre and just that story in the way you did with your little 2-page comic.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, all the stuff was crazy. He burned for 7 hours or something.
Yeah, it's it was this crazy story where
he filled up 3 ash bins, and normally a human being only fills up half an ash bin.
This funeral director had done a lot of cremations, and he said to me, he was from North Carolina, I won't try to replicate the accent, but he was like, yeah, that body burned longer than any body I have ever been around. And by a huge margin too.
And he burned. It was crazy. It was kind of morbid, but
yeah, we should probably move on. But anyway, it was. I only dwell on it because Box then took this story that would be somewhat morbid in the wrong hands, and managed to depict it in this really respectful and beautiful way. And anyway, I really have admired your work for a long time. I remember, I'm trying to even remember how I first encountered it. Must have been on the internet, is my guess.
Probably.
Do you feel like you owe a lot of your success to the World Wide Web?
Certainly, because that's where everybody congregates and everything like that. But I put Legalization Nation on Instagram and stuff for free, and I had just finished this book, right?
Which is also great, highly recommended.
Which is about how weed became illegal in the first place. But as in the process of doing this, I got really obsessed with cannabis legalization now. And I remember being I want to do a follow-up book to this about legalization. But if I'd made a book about legalization now, it would have come out for 2 years, and it would be completely irrelevant.
The landscape's going to completely change.
Because shit's moving so fast, it's impossible to even encapsulate it in one thing. So Legalization Nation is my witness of what is happening around me, because I started making it because I was so fucking astounded at the legalization. All right, so the first time I went to a legal weed store probably was in Seattle or something like that.
Makes sense. Mine was Portland.
Yeah, something like that. Or maybe it was Colorado even. But I had been to a bunch of these dispensaries out west, and when they started like talking about legalization in Pennsylvania, I was like, yes, this is going to be great. It's going to be just like those dispensaries in California and shit that I go to, and are like, they have all this weed. Like, I was just like,
like hugely potent. And
I was just like, they have tons of shit. Like, it's just whatever. And then what we got in Pennsylvania was Cresco and fucking Curaleaf and all these other fucking shitty. There's like 20 companies, and they're all multi-state operators. True Leave. You know,
and like the people who run these companies don't even use. It's like they're not.
Yeah.
Vampires. People who don't even, who like proudly talk about, I don't even smoke joints. How about that? I've never done weed, but I'm the CEO. Doesn't that make me feel confident about my product?
Yeah. I mean, so when I saw that shit start happening, all right, so really what happened, I got my medical card and I started going to the dispensaries, and I would like get into an argument every time I was there.
Oh my God. What would you fight about?
Because I'd walk in and I'd be like, all right, why am I they make you go through these ridiculous procedures. Like, it's like almost like getting on an airplane, I feel like. You know, you gotta
it's security theater.
Yeah. You gotta get your card checked by this guy, then this guy's gotta check your card and let you in the other room, and then whatever. So then you're in there and you're waiting in line, whatever, and someone's like, oh yeah, the next person that comes up is like, yeah, all talking about the products that they have, and I'm like, your fucking products suck. Like, everything that you have in the store is terrible. But like, and then I would like get into arguments about like, I don't know, it was just a bad scene. I would be like,
word.
So I had to stop doing it. I like let my medical card run out, and so I wouldn't get into fights or arguments with the people that don't need to be in an argument. The person working the register at the store does not need to be in an argument with some asshole that's just pissed off at like the greater fucking stuff over their head. They're just like trying to work a regular job.
System, man.
Yeah, like it's not their fault. Like, so I would be like, I remember one time I was like trying not to say anything the whole time, and I must have just like looked pissed off. And the guy was like, all right, see you later. But I wasn't talking really. And he's like, I hope your day gets better.
That's sweet. I should use that. Anyone who's rude to me, I hope your day gets better.
Yeah. So like making Legalization Nation was like my like way to fight. I was like fucking just yelling and like be going on Twitter and shit and being like, don't you understand?
Right.
What's happening? And people would be like, whatever. One like, oh wow, Box is nuts about weed, I guess now. But once I started making it into comics, people started reading it.
I loved that you did that because, I mean, I'm a journalist. That's how I came to publishing. And you did legit journalism. You were excuse me, I shouldn't have had that Dr. Pepper. You were on top of these stories and the larger meta story in a way that very few journalists were.
Yeah.
You were covering it, but also the way you were presenting it was really digestible. And a lot of times journalism these days is not. And putting it on Instagram I think was really interesting because there aren't ads there. Yeah. Not on like you're not like looking at Box's feed and like, we have to do an ad for, whatever. You have to like, it was just the raw comics and it was so good.
Because I was just like, fuck it. Because also like the world of publishing actually is, even though this book was put out by a pretty big publisher, like they're kind of just as there's this anti-weed stigma
absolutely.
in publishing as well. Even though they'll put out weed books or whatever, it's like very sanitized corporate like version of that.
Children's
I'm not
books
saying my book
weed,
is like that. My book is amazing, but
it is.
Other books like that.
Not lying.
So like, even pitching that, people are like, yeah, I don't know. I've heard that stoners don't buy books. Like,
I heard that stoners don't buy books. Well, you're really writing off a very rapidly growing and already large section of the population at that point.
Yeah. So like that's the kind of stuff, and there's so much stigma like that. So like, I felt like I was in a position where I could just be like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I could just talk about myself. I don't care if people know I smoke weed. I fucking make comics for a living. Like,
Right.
although I'm sure it's hurt me at some point. Like, I did pitch a children's book to Scholastic one time, and I think they just Googled me and then turned me down flat.
They'll come running when they need recommendations on strains.
There'll be something.
It'll be fine. How long, on average, did it take you to do one of the Legalization Nation strips?
So, I don't get paid very much for doing the strips, so I try to like not make it too much of my day.
That's very wise.
You know what I'm
know
saying?
your worth.
So, but it ends up like I'm so involved in it and interested in it that it sometimes ends up taking like a day or two, where it should only take me like a few hours, but.
Yeah, but like, I'm really, it's a record. I mean, that's the other thing is it's journalism, but it was also sort of this kind of descent into madness, like one man's descent into madness. Like, you start seeing these recurring things pop up where it's like, this problem in cannabis just isn't getting solved.
Yeah.
Why isn't anybody paying attention
Never
to this?
ending, yeah.
I know.
I got to do a lot of things with it. I mean, I got to interview fucking people. I interviewed like the guy who runs New Jersey cannabis.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I was just like, do you talk to these guys that like regulators? I get to talk to regulators. And
Sure.
These are like the most. I mean, some people I guess do well. I mean, it's regulation, whatever. But most of these people have no knowledge of cannabis.
No, absolutely not.
Like they're
They're professional regulators.
Yes, and they've come in and it's like teaching a baby. It's like it's like they're a baby, and you have to teach them about 50, 100 years of cannabis history.
Right.
And the baby is in charge. So
the baby is in charge is really how a lot of America sounds right now, so I'm not surprised.
So I mean, that's what we're up against for the most part.
Yes.
Very rarely, once in a while, there's cannabis regulators that stand out that seem to kind of like understand certain aspects of it, but very rarely are they like people who know cannabis. Not even like know it at all. Like I would say that like most regulators do not smoke cannabis and never have smoked.
No, they're professional bureaucrats, which there's a good place for bureaucrats, but like if you're having that much power over what is essentially just an essential good now.
Yeah.
Like it's really remarkable the degree to which cannabis has become just in anywhere where you can get it with any kind of ease. It has just become another medication, that happens to not be at the regular pharmacy.
Right. Yeah. And to me, it's what's nuts always is that like I'd be like, okay, we're in a place right now. Let's say weed's legal. Weed's legal where we are. Yet, unless you pay millions and millions and millions of dollars, you can't actually like sell it
legally sell it. So to what extent does that even mean it's meaningfully legal?
Yeah, so it's not really legal. And
No.
And the other thing is that this is in the Legalization Nation book, is that like we watched New York talk about legalization like they were gonna fucking come in and like change the world and re fucking change the whole concept of legalization where it's just gonna be this amazing free-for-all or whatever. Yeah. And what we found is that it's identical to every other state that exists, where it's like they pretty much kowtow to corporate interests always.
Right. It's just they started out with that hitting the ground running with everybody starting to sell weed at every goddamn bodega.
Yeah.
So it's hard to play catch up, but they're sure trying.
Yeah. I mean, this is what happens when you legalize. Like, if you legalize something, right, a product, a market develops for it, and as many people that can sell it will sell it.
Right, but it's not a
and
capitalist
other people are gonna
competition.
The people who are not good at it, who don't provide good shit, are not providing good service, are gonna fall by the wayside. So that's what's gonna happen. The people that provide the good shit, that have good weed, that provide a good service, are going to be in the game longer.
100%. Can I just say, unrelated to that, great vans.
These are my Brett the Hitman Hart custom.
I was about to say, are they Hitman
Yeah.
vans, hit vans? Wow.
Yeah,
Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail. I was just like, it takes a real man to do that. So,
Yeah.
anyway,
I was
back to
gonna,
legalization.
I was going to ask you about.
Ask me anything.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about so what are you smoking on lately?
What am I smoking on?
What are your habits?
What you smoking on? I have recently been really, I say recently, the past few years have been a real journey for me of kind of accepting that my problem is not weed, my problem is anxiety, which the weed actually treats.
Yeah.
Like,
I went through the same exact.
yeah, exactly. Like, I went through this period where I was like, maybe if I stop doing weed, my problems will go away. My problems got a lot worse during my experimental period of not doing weed. And then I realized, like, oh, honest to God, we'll do a comics metaphor here. The only way I could compare it to anything was the weed was the adamantium on my bone claws, but the bone claws were the anxiety. So it was like when Magneto rips the adamantium out of Wolverine, everyone's like, oh no, his whole claw thing is gonna go away. What? There were bones there the whole time? Underneath the adamantium? That was me. I was like, there was anxiety there the whole time? This terrible complex.
You were being protected by the weed.
Right, the weed was protecting me, if anything.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I've really felt a lot better about my weed use. Also, I've developed a following in the post-apocalyptic Twitter world after I got banned from Twitter in June. I'm very glad to be gone. I'm glad that choice was taken out of my hands. I am now on Blue Sky, and there is like such a weed culture on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Blue Sky is like, it has its problems as a social platform, but like weed is A-okay.
Yeah, people are way open about all this shit.
Yeah, it's really wild.
Yeah.
Like, I get really encouraged to talk more about, literally today, I changed my profile photo from what it had been for a few months.